ProjectAD.me has some of the best supplements around. You guys know that I've supported Project AD from the beginning. They've supported Beast Fitness Radio from the beginning. Joe Binley over there has a whole team of just amazing guys. If you go to their website, you can actually check out and see their entire health line, which includes a fiber product, an actual greens and reds product, a heart and liver and kidney-based products. We have an actual one of the best glucose disposal agents on the market, if not the best. We have Aminotor, which is essentially essential and branched amino acid product. We have Nitrox, which is more of a pump-based formula. We have Raging Full, which is going to be your intra-workout carbohydrates, but also can be used in a peri-workout setting. There is things for digestion. There's things for energy. There's things for fat loss. Overall, Project AD has everything you need. Use coupon code BFR25 at checkout to save you guys some money and obviously to support this podcast and support Joe Binley. Mike Arnold has been nice enough to come on Beast Fitness Radio weekly, do Q&As, do topic videos, and so because of that, and because he actually does help sponsor this podcast as well, we want to show him some support. Check out maresearchchems.net, coupon code ALEX15, and masupps.com for code ALEX20. Over at MA Research Chems, those are all HPLC tested peptides, SARMs, all that kind of good stuff. And over at masupps.com, he has more of his specialty-based supplements. Guys, please go support him. You're supporting the show, you're supporting me, you're supporting Mike Arnold. All good guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode.
Disclaimer, I wanted to say right up front that all MA research compounds are for research use only. In vitro use research is the only legal acceptable application. So anything we're going to talk about from this point forward is strictly done for entertainment purposes. There are no recommendations or guidelines given outside the realm of entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Online Prep Coach Oscar here with theprepcoach.com, back with another Beast Fitness Radio educational segment. Today I wanted to talk about prepping naturally versus enhanced and prepping males versus females. And not even prepping. I figured that would be the best catchy way to get people to want to listen to this, but even just training and working with naturals versus enhanced in males versus females. This goes back because I've had a lot of people inquiring lately. I've had a lot of success this season with everyone, males, females, natural, enhanced, different sports, everything like that. And I've talked about it enough to the point where I didn't think I had to tell people that, yes, I work with everyone. But apparently a lot of people lately are surprised that I work with a lot of naturals. And it's kind of funny to me, first of all, because I try and preface everything within context. I try and give context to absolutely everything I do. Not only that, but I post so many things on my Instagram, so many progress pictures and transformations. A lot of my clients, probably 50% of them actually don't want me to post pictures of them just because they're moms and dads or their work or whatever. But you get the general idea. I work with a good amount of people from every different spectrum of life. Now, because of that, I thought it would actually be really cool, and believe it or not, I actually had this question brought up to me this morning by a client, or maybe it was last night, but either way, a client brought it up, and what was the biggest difference is when you work with someone who's natural or enhanced. And it's funny, because, and I want to make sure that I don't second guess or second say what I'm trying to actually get through to you guys, if that's even a right phrasing or right verbiage at all, but physiology and biology really does not change between males and females, between naturals versus enhanced. But it also changes completely. It's hard to actually put into words how different it is. It's almost like building a house or buying a house, in the sense that at the end of the day, you're still having a house, but there's a lot of differences that actually go into that. And at the end of the day, if you're enhanced, that house is going to be bigger. If you're natural, the end of the day, that house is going to be smaller. That goes the same across the board for males and females. Again, relating from a natural to enhanced aspect. So I wanted to go through and break down everything. I figured I would cover natural versus enhanced first, and then go into gender differences, particularly looking at the female side of things, because I've talked a lot about the male side of things. I've even talked a lot about the female side of things, but it at least gets people to understand things a little bit differently. So, first of all, natural competitors. If you just look at males, if you actually look at some of the, actual observational studies that were done, during puberty, a lot of males produce about, at the maximum, 10 milligrams of hormones per day. So at the end of the week, they're at about 70 to 100 milligrams of hormone. Now, natural competitors, male or female, can only manipulate training, nutrition, and cardio. In general, what that's going to mean is they're going to have less tools to work with. Now, in a sense, that's, You hear that and you kind of think, okay, less tools to play with, that means it's going to be harder, but then that's not always the case. So let me get into those reasons why. Because honestly, I don't see prep or the off season or anything. Actually, I only see building muscle to be easier for enhanced individuals than naturals, but actually getting lean, doing a lot of these other things, I really don't see, one is easier than the other. I just see it as being different. And again, let me explain that. First of all, natural competitors, they're going to need more protein, so they're going to need more dietary nitrogen. Go back to Lyle McDonald's protein book. Everyone should have read that by now. I probably read it 17 times. That's one of those things where you really get the baseline for how much protein that you should be intaking. Obviously, as a natural competitor, you need that nitrogen. Nitrogen cannot come from carbohydrates. Nitrogen cannot come from fats. It can only come from proteins. So in general, natural competitors are going to need a fairly decent nitrogen intake. And remember, all of this and what I'm saying now, what I've already said, is very broad spectrum. None of this holds true for everyone. There's going to be minor differences in people's environments, how they're brought up, their genetic profile, epigenetics, all that good stuff. But just know this is a very broad overview. So in general, a lot of natural competitors can benefit from a little bit higher training frequency. And that goes back to a lot of the protein synthetic rate studies. But then again, you have the argument of looking at total workload and volume during the week. You have to correlate that with actual intensity. And so maybe that doesn't have as much stock as it once did, but it's something to kind of keep an eye on. In general, I really prefer to keep both my enhanced and natural competitors working at a frequency of about 1 to 2, maybe 1 to 3 times per week training frequency. And very few people will actually be at that 3 range. I feel like most people respond best to about 1.5 to 2. So 1.5 actually being a split similar to mine, where every 9 days, I'm essentially hitting every muscle group 2 times. Again, it's going to vary from person to person, but in general, I would say naturals would err on the side of caution, and a lot of them tend to respond better to working out about 2 times per week. But that doesn't mean that the bro splits or anything don't have tremendous validity, because again, a lot of it comes back to total workload, total work volume, and total intensity throughout the entire week. The traditional, everyone will just say progressive overload. That is one thing that naturals really do have to focus on, and everyone should actually focus on, is traditional heavyweight progression. So obviously what we mean by that is when you look at changes in drivers in cross-sectional area. I've already talked about this on that previous podcast I did, talking about different ways to elicit hypertrophy. One of the most surefire ways to do that is to be adding load to the bar. Now, that load on the bar literally does not mean anything unless tension's being applied. So all that means is you need to be fully shortening, fully lengthening, and actually fully contracting the working muscle. So let's look at pecs for an example, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. A flat bench press for me does nothing for development of my pecs. It literally, if I start first, it does nothing for me. But if I add my flat bench press at the end of my workout, after everything else that I have done, then all of a sudden I can fully shorten and fully lengthen my pecs a lot better. I can keep all the tension on my pecs and not have it transfer over to my delts and triceps. And then with that same form, with creating that same amount of tension, keeping that tension on my muscle, then over time, I can add load to that bar, and that is going to be beneficial. So that's why you hear people like Lyle McDonald and many others talk about progressive tension overload. Yes, that is a main contributor to increasing cross-sectional area. There are a lot of other ways to go about actually eliciting hypertrophic avenues and events and cascades. I've talked about that multiple times before, especially on that podcast I did 2 weeks ago. So go back and listen to that. But just know in general, especially with natural competitors, they really need to focus on that progression, just like everyone else. And I would say maybe a little bit less than on some of the other avenues if you are a traditional physique competitor. But again, that does not mean that they do not have tremendous validity. If you just look at blood volume and what that can do, if you look at all of the different interactions and other cascades that can happen, it makes sense why that you can't just continually progress on load linearly over time. That's not how it works, and you're going to burn out, joints are going to give out, and you're just going to stop growing over time. So even though we're keeping the key tenets of hypertrophy and progression in our mind, you still need to realize there are other avenues. And if you are natural, again, you need to actually train the same way an enhanced competitor would, most likely with just less. You're probably going to be using less weight. You might not be as strong as an enhanced competitor. You might be using less volume because obviously given the fact that anabolics and androgens actually hypertrophy those specific fiber types, then you're probably going to handle less volume as a natural competitor. But the overall tenets of training pretty much stay the same. It's kind of just, again, how much you're actually doing. Where naturals will generally only be able to handle less, enhanced competitors will be able to handle more, but that's very general because I've seen it go either or. I've seen some natural guys out-train some enhanced competitors, so it's really going to depend. In general, with natural competitors, they're going to consume less calories just because they are smaller humans. Look at their amount of muscle tissue. Look at their amount of fat tissue. It's a very simple equation there where obviously if you have less metabolically active tissue, then generally you're going to consume less calories. But again, this isn't a one-to-one equation because then you look at actual metabolic interventions. You look at different metabolic cascades, and you have some people that are the hard gainers, quote unquote, or the easy gainers. Is that the other one? I don't even know what they're called. But the people that can just put down thousands upon thousands of calories, and they're generally the skinnier individuals that just have a hard time putting on muscle. That could be a natural competitor. I've had a lot of natural competitors that diet on 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrates, where I've had some enhanced competitors go down to 50 grams of carbohydrates. I've also had the exact same flip-flop where the natural guy's only taking in 50 grams of carbs, and the enhanced competitors up in the couple hundred grams of carbs. So once again, even though we look at the general equation of muscle tissue and lean metabolically active tissue, it's not a one-to-one equation. Now, one thing that does hold up tremendously true across the board is with natural competitors, you're going to need less supplementation. What I mean by that, just get your basic health needs met purely for longevity. I don't care who you are or what you think. Prep is not healthy. Getting down that lean is not going to be healthy for you no matter what you do, no matter what way you look at it. So get your basic health needs met first, maybe sprinkle on a few ergogenics on top of that, like your creatines of the world, things of that nature, and you're pretty much done. So natural competitors should really focus on training, nutrition, and cardiovascular interventions, and then kind of have supplementation there. I know or at least a lot of natural competitors really want to push the supplementation, and I will with certain natural competitors purely from an actual fat loss standpoint. So something very common that'll have a lot of natural competitors do is before their cardio, have something like a green tea extract, an actual coffee, caffeine. I mean, look at all the literature that actually piles up there. It's almost mind-blowing some of the differences that you can see and just some of the, actual cascades that can be started from actually consuming coffee or actually consuming green tea, because it's not just the constituents in there that you can buy in capsule form, but it's also the nature of it being heated and changing the entire process of how it's metabolized and some of its other metabolites and constituents. But natural competitors in general, just going to need less supplementation. Now, obviously, turning the table on the enhanced competitor side, you can manipulate training, nutrition, cardio, androgens, growth hormone, insulin. You have all that category of quote-unquote fat burners where you have your thyroid, even though I don't really want to throw that in there. You have your clenbuterols, which can be used as an anabolic aid as well. You have your DNPs. I mean, you have a lot of different things going on there. One of the things that I didn't mention before is that in general, actually not in general, this is another 50-50. It's not always a one-to-one equation. But I feel like a lot of natural competitors have a better neurological advantage purely due to the absence of extremely high androgens. Look at some of the neurological disadvantage that a lot of bodybuilder gets. And a lot of this is actually due to the fact that they're just not actually programming their pharmaceuticals right. So generally, they may have that aggressive demeanor. They may be very insecure, which, I mean, that's kind of a personal thing. It goes far beyond just intake of androgens. But look at the families of drugs. People that are really pushing that 19-nor category and getting some of those neurological, potentially disadvantageous effects, they're going to have more of an issue than some of the natural competitors. But the same can be said on the enhanced side. If they know what they're doing, they may have some DHTs in the equation. It's really going to change based on the presence of high androgens or the absence of high androgens. It's going to depend on the person, their environment, their demeanor as a whole. In general, if you're an asshole when you're natural, you're going to be even more of an asshole when you're enhanced. If you're a calm human being as a natural competitor, I've seen a lot of people just stay even, just as calm, if not more calm, being enhanced. It really comes back to the person and the individual. But there is a massive interaction that needs to kind of be known there from an androgen present aspect. Now, technically, enhanced competitors are going to need technically less protein, less nitrogen, because androgens obviously increase nitrogen efficiency, so you can get more nitrogen out of the protein you're taking in. That is one thing clear across the board. Naturals do need more protein, enhanced competitors do not. That's not to say that higher protein diets or lower protein diets aren't going to be beneficial based on the situation. Particularly for myself, I absolutely love eating protein. I love the recovery effects of having enhanced nitrogen and really fluxing nitrogen, like me and Andy have actually talked about a lot before on this podcast. And so even though technically enhanced competitors need less protein and technically natural competitors need more protein, that's not to say that it really can't go either way based on the equation and what's being introduced. I already talked about training frequency from the enhanced side of things. I talked about some of the neurological disadvantages that some enhanced competitors may have over naturals. We look at enhanced competitors from a training aspect even furthermore, and we know we're still focusing on those primary avenues of increasing cross-sectional area and building muscle tissue, but then you look at some of those other hypertrophic avenues, and this is where things like tissue temperature. I talked about that in a post, and people made fun of me because they said it was overthinking or overanalyzing these things. That's not meant for the everyday average individual. That's not. When you look at tissue temperature, one of the things that my good thing Broderick is very quick to point out is a lot of the work that I believe Paul Boris did, and he basically found out that androgen spontaneously combust at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. So you look at what that means and what it does from a binding protein and binding constant aspect, and you see, okay, things like tissue temperature have a lot more validity with enhanced competitors than natural competitors. You start looking at some of the other myocyte maturation based events and cascades, and again, it kind of has more efficacy and relevance with enhanced competitors than naturals, purely because you can see that accelerated rate of myocyte maturation. You're still going to need that damaging period. You're still going to need that restoration period. You're still going to have all the same steps, but say a natural competitor, it's going to happen over 20 weeks, whereas a enhanced competitor, it's going to happen over 8 weeks. So the natural guys, it takes a lot longer, and you're going to gain a lot less muscle tissue long term. Enhanced competitors, it happens a lot faster, and you're going to gain a lot more muscle tissue faster long term. But that's another thing that you really need to really take into consideration. Once androgens are actually introduced and induced in your body, then all these other hypertrophic avenues really become even more valid. And so there is that big difference between natural and enhanced competitors. But again, those other hypertrophic avenues still have tremendous validity for both sides, naturals and enhanced, males and females. Obviously, on the enhanced competitors with more muscle tissue, again, they're generally going to consume more calories. But again, I've already talked about how that can go either way. And in general, and this is actually clear across the board, I think, enhanced competitors are going to need more supplementation, period. They're going to need to cover their health markers. They're going to need to take the drugs that they're taking because they're enhanced. And then on top of that, they may even throw some over-the-counter ergogenic aids on top of that, which may or may not be needed depending on the situation and who you're talking to and their stance on supplementation as a whole. But obviously, one of the things that a lot of enhanced competitors do wrong is the fact that they take all these drugs, but then they're not looking at their basic health needs. They get blood work done, they realize, oh wow, my lipid panel, my my cholesterol, my actual hematology panel. They look at all these things and they say, oh, they're pretty crazy, but you know what, I'm blasting, so it doesn't matter. And to me, it's kind of like, okay, we are trying to be healthy year round, so we should probably take some basic health supplements year round. You guys know my background in health supplementation. You guys know what I've been able to do with my lipid panel, taking it from literally under 10 all the way up to in the mid 20s. And that was just a genetic disadvantage of me. That had nothing to do with any supplementation or enhancement or anything done. That was purely my genetic family tree, where everyone in my family tree has a terrible lipid panel. And believe it or not, I've been able to have a better lipid panel than anyone in my family that I know, and I am still undergoing the enhanced side of competition because of all these other things being met. We've talked so many things. I actually did a podcast with Broderick for his paid website, so it's teamevilgsp.com, and we talked about 5 of at least my favorite over-the-counter health supplements for actual health for enhanced individuals. So go over there, check that out. I obviously talk a lot about lipids because that's the one that I'm most deficient in. I hope you're starting to see the equation. I hope you're starting to form this picture in your head of why I find it very simple and easy to work with natural versus enhanced competitors. Because physiology, biology are still the same. You're still taking every individual case as an individual case, and then you can see, okay, do we have more tools or less tools to play with? And then what environment are we in? What are our goals? And really go from there. Now, gender differences. And this is pretty interesting. So, females, again, at their peak, we'll say at the height of their peak, they're producing roughly like a milligram of hormones per day. So, if they're natural, they're there. In general, again, women are generally going to be smaller than men. So, they're generally going to need less calories. Now, this is where it's interesting because even though, again, that is not always 100% the case, I've seen a lot of women that have more muscle tissue than men. I've seen a lot of females that can just pound calories more so than men can. There's a lot of differences going on here. One of the biggest ones, and one of the ones that I've been doing the most research into, is those estrogen levels. So specifically that 17 beta estradiol. So you're looking at estrogen nuclear receptors in muscle tissue, which actually lead to proper substrate metabolism, actually enhancements in muscle protein synthesis. Estrogen being one of the main mediators through which all anabolics actually work and cause people to grow so well. Females have that estrogen capability naturally. So they're going to have enhanced fatty acid, actual oxidative capabilities. They're going to have generally better insulin sensitivity, specifically when you look in the literature with natural females within skeletal muscle tissue. They're generally going to have higher levels of adiponectin and leptin. So again, correlating back with insulin sensitivity and some other things. They're generally going to have lower hematocrit levels, smaller hearts. I mean, you kind of get the idea. They do have that favorable effect on glucose homeostasis. And you actually, if you want to actually do some research, just because I read this study not too long ago, or a couple of these studies, it's really from the hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp studies. So there's a couple there. If I remember, I might post them all in the bottom of this actual episode. If I forget, just remind me. But then we have females actually having a greater proportion of type 1 actual fibers. That means they're going to have greater capillary density. When you actually look at FAT-CD36, that's basically a protein for bringing fatty acids into muscles and then moving them actually into the mitochondria to be utilized. The females are actually going to have higher plasma fatty acid concentrations than a lot of males. They're going to have higher levels of protein series coenzyme A desaturase. So that actually converts saturated fatty acids into unsaturated fatty acids. I mean, there's so many things here with males versus females. Even if you look at timing of what women are doing from an oxidative capacity. Again, even though at the end of the day, we're looking at overall nutrients taking in, macronutrients, calories, all that good stuff, we're not getting into nutrient timing. But with females, they tend to preferentially store more fat, yet oxidize more glucose after eating relative to men and whenever they're compared to men. Whereas whenever they're fasted, men and women basically burn about the same rate when you're looking at glucose, when you're looking at fatty acids, all that kind of good stuff. So generally what this means in application is females are going to need more cardio if they're natural or more fat burners if they're enhanced because they're generally going to have lower caloric intakes. Again, not all the time, and it's going to be depending on the individual. If they are on the enhanced side of things, females generally respond very well to clenbuterol, to metformin. I've talked about a couple of the other ones that females respond very well to. I mean, even tamoxifen. During the final weeks of a contest prep, at least to help with stubborn female fat distribution. It aids in fluid dynamics. It does a lot of cool things. There are these massive gender differences that come into play with males versus females, whether that female is natural or enhanced. So then you say, okay, male versus female. Okay, I'm working with a female. Is she natural or enhanced? Okay, she's enhanced, or okay, she's natural. And then you just go down that avenue and say, okay, this is what I'm working with. Now let's look at this specific person. Let's look at their specific environment, their lifestyle. What have they done up until this point in life? And we can go from there. And that's where the application comes in and treating everyone like their own unique person, because everyone is. I know that people don't like saying that everyone's, completely different than other people, but when it really comes down to it, they really are. Again, physiology, biology, I already said this a couple times in here. I'm just trying to nail it home. Those don't change very much, but yet those minor differences in environmental impacts, on genetic and epigenetic impacts, that changes absolutely everything from how you actually metabolize substrates to which form of training you're going to prefer. And then you get, you go down into another rabbit hole there with personality types and the differences you see with male versus females. A lot of females can train and train and train and train and out-train men. I will say 80% of the females I work with will out-train almost any other guy that I know. They are just literally built to keep going and going. If you've ever seen a female, particularly a natural female, go to squats and they're supposed to hit, a set of 10 to failure. They'll hit 10, then they'll grind out 11, then 12, then 13, then 14, then 15. Then before you know it, 6 additional reps in, and they were supposed to fail at that 10th rep. Whereas a guy, generally speaking, even though they're moving heavier poundages because they're generally going to be stronger, generally going to be bigger, they're going to usually just fail at that 10 mark. It's almost that dramatic of a difference between males versus females. So, in closing, I just want to say that prepping and working with males or females, whether they're natural or enhanced, is a completely different ballgame, but not as much as people think. It only really matters, the details only matter once you get into it, but the initial assessment of the actual biological, cluster in front of you, as Andy would say, that skin suit in front of you, it really only matters to a certain degree. So we could keep diving into the subject. I think I've hammered home more than enough details to get you guys thinking a little bit more. As always, thank you guys so much for listening. Check out theprepcoach.com. We'll see you next time. And remember, males versus females, natural versus enhanced, it's all the same, but yet it's all kind of different. So I want to leave and end on that note, on a very confusing note. Thanks for listening, guys.